Let's talk about Sophie Cunningham. A lot came out from Sophie Cunningham today about the situation involving Cathy Engelbart, Nafisi Collier, Caitlin Clark, as well as Sophie Cunningham's future.
Sophie Cunningham has never been the type to hold her tongue. But this time, she didn't just speak up, she went nuclear. After a season filled with controversy, injuries, and a growing storm surrounding Caitlin Clark's treatment in the WNBA, Cunningham delivered the kind of message that sent shockwaves through the league. Her target, none other than Commissioner Cathy Engelbart, the woman many players now accuse of failing to protect athletes, mishandling leadership, and ultimately destroying careers.
So, right here, Sophie Cunningham, quote, "There's a potential lockout. I promise you we aren't going to play until they give us what we deserve." That's kind of where it's headed, unfortunately, which would be the dumbest basketball decision business-wise ever, considering the momentum that the W has. Bravo.
Caitlin Clark may be the brightest star the WNBA has ever seen. But Sophie's words cut to the heart of a bigger crisis players, feeling abandoned by the very system that's supposed to elevate them. What started as frustration over officiating and league management has now escalated into a full-blown revolt. And when Sophie Cunningham spoke, she didn't just defend herself, she went all in for Caitlin Clark and every player feeling silenced.
She also said the following, Sophie Cunningham, on if she wants to return to the Fever. Quote, I have loved being here, and I don't think that's news to anybody. I've been in the league 7 years. I've never been a part of a team like this.
Sophie Cunningham's 2024 campaign was unlike anything she had ever experienced in her career. On paper, it was already a year that tested her toughness. A devastating MCL injury forced her into surgery, followed by months of rehab in a heavy knee brace. For most athletes, that kind of setback would have been enough to silence their voice to keep their focus on recovery.
The heat of the battle, of course, she had a blown out MCL. She had surgery for it, and she's been in one of the walking, I don't want to call it a boot, a brace.
But for Sophie, the time off the court didn't quiet her. It made her louder. It gave her clarity, and it gave her a platform to speak out about the problems she and her peers could no longer ignore. When the Indiana Fever season came to a close in the semifinals, Sophie posted a message that summed up both her pride and her frustration. You can't make this season up. So much to be proud of. You better believe we are coming for everybody next season. It was the type of competitive fire fans had come to love from her. But beneath the optimism, there was a growing storm that went beyond wins and losses. Her frustrations weren't just about the grind of the season. They were about the direction of the league itself.
If you end up in a lockout, it is disastrous. Disastrous. After what has been built the last 18 months for this basketball league, and all these fans come in. I always refer back to this. People forget MLB was dead for 5 years after they closed the season down in '94. That did a ton of damage.
As she sat watching the way Caitlin Clark was officiated, targeted, and left vulnerable without support from leadership, Sophie saw more than just bad calls. She saw a pattern of league that was capitalizing on Clark's star power while doing little to protect her on the floor. Sophie, already bruised and battered from her own injury, understood exactly what was at stake. The future of the game was being gambled away by negligence, and so she didn't hold back. Sophie Cunningham began to connect her personal experiences with the larger failings she felt were coming from Cathy Engelbert's office.
Sophie Cunningham backed up Nafisi Collier's comments. Quote, not really a fan of our leadership. I think they're failing us as a league, definitely failing us as players. It's pretty shameful. She always makes it about her, Cathy, when it should have nothing to do with her.
She reminded people that while the WNBA had momentum, it was fragile. It was only as strong as the leadership guiding it. If Caitlin Clark, the player pulling in millions of viewers and reshaping the business of women's basketball, could be allowed to suffer from poor protection and dismissive management, Then what hope did the rest of the league have? This wasn't just Sophie venting. It was a declaration of war on complacency. She openly acknowledged that the players were talking about drastic measures, a lockout, a refusal to play until conditions improved.
I think there's a lot of people in positions of power in the WNBA who they might be really great business people, but they don't know shit about basketball, and that's got to change.
That's not the kind of talk you hear unless the frustration has reached a breaking point. Sophie Cunningham's nuclear moment wasn't born out of drama. It was born out of survival for herself, for Caitlin Clark, and for the league's future. Her words were raw, emotional, and aimed directly at the commissioner. In Sophie's eyes, Engelbert had become less of a leader and more of an obstacle. And this was only the beginning of her blistering takedown of the WNBA's leadership failures.
Cunningham, disappointing the way the WNBA plays out. Quote, I think there is room for improvement when the whole league is asking for it. But the league isn't doing anything about it. Why? The WNBA leadership from top to bottom needs to be held accountable.
When Sophie Cunningham turned the conversation toward a possible lockout, the entire WNBA world froze. Lockouts are not casual threats in professional sports. They're weapons of last resort, usually reserved for players who feel their voices have been silenced and their value ignored. For Sophie to speak so openly about withholding play until the league gave athletes what they deserve, it was a thunderclap that echoed far beyond her own team. It wasn't just about money. It was about respect, safety, and the long-term survival of women's basketball. Her message carried weight because she connected it to history. Sophie reminded everyone what happened to Major League Baseball in 1994, when a season-ending strike crippled fan loyalty and left the sport gasping for air for years. MLB was a billion-dollar powerhouse, and it still suffered from years of lost momentum. The WNBA, Sophie warned, doesn't have the luxury of that kind of cushion. The league is in a fragile moment, finally capturing mainstream attention and pulling in millions of viewers thanks to Caitlin Clark's rise. But that growth can vanish in an instant if leadership steers the league into a self-inflicted shutdown. Cunningham wasn't speaking in vague generalities either. She made it clear that players are having real conversations about refusing to play. Behind closed doors, there is a growing belief that Engelbert and the league office are dragging their feet on improving conditions, whether it's travel, pay, officiating standards, or player safety. To Sophie and her peers, the promise of growth rings hollow if the league doesn't put its stars in a position to succeed. What good is Caitlin Clark drawing nearly 2 million viewers if she is left exposed to dangerous hits and inconsistent refereeing? What good is momentum if players feel disposable? The word deserve became central to Sophie's fire. Players believe they deserve investment, accountability, and protection that matches the spotlight they've generated. The WNBA has been riding a wave of historic attention, but in Sophie's eyes, Engelbert has failed to translate that momentum into real gains for the athletes. Instead, Cunningham painted a picture of a commissioner more interested in business optics than in the human. Beings who make the game possible, fans immediately grasped the severity of her warning. If a lockout actually happens, the WNBA's credibility could collapse. Television partners would pull back. Casual fans, already skeptical of women's sports, could drift away. And most damaging of all, the league's brightest star Caitlin Clark would have her career momentum sabotaged, just as she's beginning to rewrite the record books. For Sophie, that's not just bad business, it's sabotage of the sport itself. Her threat wasn't just a bargaining chip. It was a flashing red siren to the entire basketball world. The players are done being quiet. If Engelbert and her leadership team don't wake up, the league could spiral into a crisis that erases everything the last year has built. Sophie Cunningham wasn't predicting disaster. She was promising itinerant change came fast. As if Sophie Cunningham's fiery criticism of Cathy Engelbert wasn't enough, another storyline was quietly building that could reshape both her career and the Indiana Fever's future. Her free agency. For the first time in her professional journey, Sophie enters the offseason as an unrestricted free agent. That means she has the power to decide her next move. And for a player with her mix of talent, charisma, and fan loyalty, the stakes couldn't be higher. Cunningham hasn't been shy about where her heart lies. She's made it clear she's loved her time with the Fever, praising the culture, the energy around the team, and the once-in-a-generation opportunity to play alongside Caitlin Clark. She even admitted, "I've never been part of a team like this in my 7 years in the league." Those words sound like a love letter to Indiana. But Sophie was careful to leave the door open. "I might be blonde, but I can't just not look at other opportunities," she said with a smirk. That comment wasn't just playful, it was a warning shot to the Fever's front office and Engelbert's league. The truth is, Sophie's value has never been higher. Playing with Caitlin Clark has elevated her profile nationally in ways that weren't possible before. Fans who had never paid attention to her career are now wearing her jersey, following her social media, and attaching their loyalty to her story. That kind of growth is priceless, and Sophie knows it. If the Fever wanted to keep her, it's not just about money, it's about commitment. She wants to know whether Indiana sees her as a foundational piece or simply a short-term fit. The decision isn't simple. Other franchises are lurking, ready to pounce. The Chicago Sky, for example, offer her a chance to play in a major market, but without the massive TV numbers Indiana pulls. In fact, the Fever have been drawing nearly 2 million viewers on national broadcasts, while teams like Chicago barely scratch a fraction of that. For Sophie, this is the Dallas Cowboys effect. Just like players who wear the Cowboys star in the NFL benefit from the global exposure of America's team, Fever players right now benefit from the Caitlin Clark effect. Every game is a headline, every highlight a viral moment. Leaving that spotlight could mean trading competitive relevance for anonymity. At the same time, the pull of free agency is real. Sophie could command a bigger role elsewhere, more touches, and possibly more money. Expansion teams are coming soon, and those organizations may be looking for a recognizable, marketable star to build around. Sophie fits that mold perfectly. She's tough, outspoken, and has a game that resonates with fans. Being the face of a new franchise might be tempting, especially if she feels Indiana is unsure about her long-term fit. For now, her future hangs in the balance. Stay with Caitlin Clark and ride the Fever's rocket ship, or carve her own path, risking the exposure. Either way, Sophie Cunningham has made one thing clear: she won't be overlooked again. The WNBA is on the cusp of major change, with expansion franchises preparing to reshape the competitive balance of the league. For Sophie Cunningham, this couldn't come at a more pivotal moment. As an unrestricted free agent, she's not just another player weighing her options. She's a proven veteran, a fiery competitor, and a recognizable personality who could instantly become the face of a new franchise. And with the Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire set to debut soon, Sophie's name naturally enters the conversation. The Fever gave her visibility by pairing her with Caitlin Clark, but expansion teams may offer her something Indiana cannot: top billing. In Portland or Toronto, Sophie could step into a role that isn't secondary to anyone. She'd be the focal point, the veteran presence around whom a new culture is built. For a player who just scorched the league office and publicly declared players won't tolerate poor leadership, being the cornerstone of a new franchise aligns with her bold personality. She wouldn't just be a starter, she'd be the headline. There's also the geographic and cultural fit to consider. Portland offers a basketball-obsessed city with a fan base that has supported the Trailblazers for decades. They're hungry for a women's team to rally behind, and Sophie's gritty style of play could instantly win them over. Toronto, on the other hand, represents a chance to expand the league's global reach. The Raptors built a basketball empire in Canada, and the same infrastructure could turn the Tempo into a marketing machine. Sophie's outspoken nature and competitive fire could make her the perfect ambassador for that kind of market. But expansion isn't the only angle. Relocation and revival are always hovering in the background. Many fans continue to call for the return of the Houston Comets, one of the league's original dynasties. And when you think about it, Sophie Cunningham in Texas makes perfect sense. Her southern grit, her personality, and her aggressive on-court presence fit perfectly with the kind of loyal fan culture that thrives in Texas. If the Comets or another franchise return to the Lone Star State, Sophie could be the exact type of player fans rally around. All of this speculation underscores one point: Sophie's market value has skyrocketed. She's not just a good player anymore, she's a brand. The Caitlin Clark spotlight amplified her profile. But it's Sophie's authenticity and fire that keep fans paying attention. Other teams know that signing her isn't just about adding a shooter or defender, it's about inheriting her personality, her fan base, and her willingness to speak truth to power. The Fever may want to hold on to her, but they're not the only ones at the table. Expansion franchises and existing contenders are circling. Sophie Cunningham has the rare chance to leverage her free agency into something bigger than herself, possibly becoming the face of a new era in women's basketball. The only question is whether she stays in Caitlin Clark's orbit or lights her own path. If there was any doubt about Sophie Cunningham's willingness to call things as she sees them, her comments about Commissioner Cathy Engelbart erased it. Sophie didn't just criticize, she went scorched earth, aiming directly at the woman who has positioned herself as the architect of the WNBA's current growth. For Sophie, Engelbert isn't a visionary leader, but a roadblock standing in the way of progress. And she made sure the world knew it. Not really a fan of our leadership. I think they're failing us as a league, definitely failing us as players. It's pretty shameful she always makes it about her when it should have nothing to do with her. Those weren't the words of a rookie venting after a tough loss. They were the words of a seasoned veteran who has seen enough to recognize patterns of failure. Sophie Cunningham essentially accused Engelbert of prioritizing her own image over the health of the game. That kind of statement is nuclear in professional sports. Commissioners usually operate with a shield of authority, untouchable in the eyes of the athletes. But Sophie tore through that shield and exposed Engelbert's leadership for what many players believe it to be out of touch, overly corporate, and completely disconnected from the day-to-day struggles of the women on the floor. Her criticism didn't stop at personality. Sophie made it clear the league is ignoring the most obvious problems. The officiating, still wildly inconsistent. Player safety, overlooked. The structure of the season and resources for recovery, barely addressed. And while Engelbert boasts about sponsorship deals and new media packages, Sophie argued that the players see little of that trickle down in ways that actually improve their lives or careers. In her eyes, Engelbert has built a brand but neglected the people powering it. The harshest sting in Sophie's comments was the timing. This wasn't off-season chatter or locker room gossip. It came as the WNBA was riding its biggest wave of popularity in years, driven almost entirely by Caitlin Clark's arrival. Fans, media, and sponsors were finally locked in. Yet instead of uniting behind this moment, Sophie claimed Engelbert was squandering it through poor leadership and misplaced priorities. To fans, the bluntness was shocking. To fellow players, it was liberating. Cunningham voiced what many had whispered privately, that Cathy Engelbart might be a savvy businesswoman, but she is no basketball mind. She doesn't understand the flow of the game, the toll of the schedule, or the need for tougher protections on the court. And worse, she appears unwilling to listen. This wasn't just personal frustration from Sophie Cunningham, it was the beginning of a public revolt. By attacking Engelbert so directly, Sophie cracked open the door for others to follow. And that's exactly what happened. As stars like Napheesa Collier began echoing the same concerns, escalating the pressure on Engelbert's embattled leadership. Sophie Cunningham's nuclear comments didn't land in isolation. They lit the fuse on a much bigger movement that had been simmering for months. Across the WNBA, frustration with Cathy Engelbert's leadership has been spreading. Sophie's willingness to go public gave other players the courage to step forward. Suddenly, what once looked like a few isolated complaints started to feel like a coordinated revolt. Napheesa Collier had already raised eyebrows when she questioned whether Engelbert truly understood the needs of players. Collier hinted at a deep disconnect between the commissioner's office and the athletes, painting a picture of leadership more focused on press releases than player safety. When Sophie echoed those same frustrations, the criticism gained legitimacy. It wasn't just one disgruntled player, it was stars. Across teams sounding the same alarm, the heart of their complaint was simple. Players felt abandoned. Caitlin Clark, the league's biggest attraction, had endured relentless targeting on the court. Instead of addressing the issue head-on, Engelbert and her team seemed content to let the spectacle continue. To players like Sophie and Collier, that was unacceptable. They saw it as proof that the league would rather exploit Clark's drawing power than protect her health and career. And if a generational star like Caitlin wasn't being shielded, what chance did the rest of them have? Behind closed doors, conversations grew sharper. Talk of a lockout wasn't just theoretical, anymore it was gaining traction. Cunningham herself had mentioned the idea, and others began repeating it. That kind of unified stance terrified fans who remembered how devastating the MLB strike of 1994 was for baseball's popularity. The WNBA, with its fragile momentum, couldn't afford a similar collapse. Yet the players were signaling that they were prepared to take that risk if leadership didn't change course. The revolt wasn't only about Engelbert's handling of on-court issues. It was about everything: the officiating, the travel conditions, the lack of accountability in league offices, and the sense that decisions were being made without player input. Athletes felt that while Angelbert celebrated partnerships and expansion, the women actually carrying the league were left to deal with inconsistent schedules and unsafe playing environments. What made this moment even more dangerous for Angelbert was the timing. With the WNBA entering a new era of exposure and financial growth, losing the trust of its most visible players could undo years of progress. Fans were tuning in to watch Clark, Collier, and Cunningham, not league executives. If those same stars were now leading a public revolt against leadership, the league's credibility was in jeopardy. And looming in the background was Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner. Players and fans alike began asking why he remained silent while the WNBA teetered on the edge of chaos. His inaction only fueled speculation. Was the NBA willing to intervene, or would Engelbert be allowed to keep her grip on power despite the growing mutiny? Sophie's words had become a spark, but now the fire was spreading. The revolt was no longer a whisper, it was a roar that threatened to consume the WNBA's fragile foundation. While Sophie Cunningham was busy blasting Cathy Engelbert and fueling a wider player revolt, another storyline quietly developed that could change the Indiana Fever's trajectory. Her future with the team is suddenly uncertain, and the tension around whether she stays or leaves is now at the center of fan debates. Sophie is heading into free agency, and though she has expressed her love for the Fever, questions are emerging about whether head coach Stephanie White and the organization truly want to keep her long-term. Cunningham has made it clear that she enjoyed her season in Indiana, calling it one of the most unique and rewarding experiences of her career. Playing alongside Caitlin Clark gave her exposure she had never experienced before, and the Fever's fan base embraced her fiery energy and unapologetic personality. Yet, for all her loyalty to the team, Sophie hinted that she is keeping her options open. That single statement has kept fans on edge, wondering if they've seen her in a Fever jersey for the last time. The stakes are higher than most realize. Cunningham isn't just another rotation player. She's a culture setter. Her toughness, willingness to speak out, and ability to hit clutch shots brought an edge to Indiana that can't easily be replaced. Losing Sophie would mean losing a veteran presence who has already proven she's willing to go to war for her teammates, especially Caitlin Clark. But her outspokenness could also be a reason why her position with the Fever is complicated. Rumors have swirled that Stephanie White might not be fully aligned with Sophie's role in the team's long-term plans. This creates a dangerous scenario. If Sophie feels undervalued by the Fever, while expansion teams or other contenders are offering her star treatment, why would she stay? Leaving the Fever wouldn't just be about money, it would be about respect. Sophie's comments about leadership failures suggest she isn't interested in sticking around environments that don't prioritize players. If she feels Indiana's coaching staff or management is hesitant about her, she might see free agency as a chance to reset. For the Fever, the loss would be devastating. Not only would it weaken their roster, but it would also send the wrong message to Caitlin Clark. Clark has already endured a season of hard fouls, questionable officiating, and relentless pressure. Watching a loyal teammate like Sophie Cunningham walk away could shake the foundation of trust that Indiana is trying to build around her. The Fever are already under the spotlight as America's team of the WNBA, drawing record-breaking ratings and fan engagement. If they fail to keep one of their most outspoken leaders, critics will say management is blind to the importance of culture. Sophie Cunningham's future in Indiana is hanging by a thread. Stay, and she becomes part of a juggernaut team centered around Caitlin Clark. Leave, and she risks walking away from the brightest spotlight in women's basketball, but gains freedom to lead elsewhere. Either way, her decision will ripple across the league and could define the Fever's next chapter. If Sophie Cunningham's words rocked the WNBA, the reaction from fans turned it into an earthquake. The moment she went after Cathy Engelbert and demanded accountability, supporters flooded social media with praise, outrage, and fierce debate. To many, Sophie became the voice of the players, a fearless veteran who said what others were too nervous to say. Her honesty resonated with a fan base that had grown frustrated watching Caitlin Clark endure hard fouls, inconsistent officiating, and a commissioner who seemed more interested in photo ops than fixing problems. Fans across Indiana rallied behind her. Fever supporters know Sophie isn't just a role player, she embodies grit. Her willingness to take charges, hit big shots, and defend teammates made her a cult favorite, and her decision to publicly defend Caitlin only cemented that loyalty. "She's the heart of this team," one fan wrote online. "If Indiana doesn't keep her, it's a huge mistake." The sentiment spread quickly, with hashtags demanding the Fever re-sign Cunningham, trending during the offseason. But her appeal extends far beyond Indianapolis. Around the league, fans who previously overlooked Sophie started to view her differently. Playing with Caitlin Clark gave her national visibility. But it was her courage to challenge Engelbert that won her new admirers. Suddenly, she wasn't just a scrappy veteran, she was a symbol of resistance. Fans of other franchises openly admitted they would follow Sophie wherever she went. If she joined a contender like Las Vegas or became the face of an expansion team in Portland or Toronto, her fan base would travel with her. That kind of loyalty is rare in women's sports, where league exposure is still growing. This ripple effect highlights something deeper. Sophie Cunningham's legacy may not be defined by championships or stat sheets, but by influence. She has positioned herself as a player who refuses to stay silent, even when it means clashing with the commissioner. That boldness creates pressure on the league, and it forces conversations that Engelbert can no longer ignore. Fans see her as the connective tissue between themselves and the players, voicing concerns they've been shouting for months. At the same time, Sophie's future has become a point of anxiety. Supporters fear that if she leaves Indiana, it will fracture the chemistry Caitlin Clark is building. Others argue that Sophie deserves a bigger stage and should chase opportunities where she can be the centerpiece of a roster. Either way, her decisions in the coming months will be followed closely not only by Fever fans, but by the entire WNBA audience. Sophie Cunningham may have started as a spark off the bench, but now she's become a fire the league can't control. Her fight for Caitlin Clark, her fearless critique of Engelbert, and her uncertain future with the Fever have made her one of the most talked about players in basketball. And wherever she goes next, fans will be watching, ready to carry her voice forward. Sophie Cunningham's voice has become impossible to ignore. What began as a season filled with personal challenges and recovery from injury ended with her unleashing one of the most powerful statements in recent WNBA history. She didn't just call out Cathy Engelbert, she held up a mirror to the league, exposing its failures to protect players and nurture its brightest star, Caitlin Clark. Her warnings about a lockout, her openness about free agency, and her fierce loyalty to teammates show that Sophie isn't afraid to risk her own future for the sake of the game's survival. Whether she stays with the Fever, leads an expansion team, or becomes a symbol of player resistance elsewhere, her words will echo long after this season. The WNBA stands at a crossroads, and Sophie Cunningham's fire has forced everyone, fans, players, and league officials, to face the truth about what comes next.